Before leaving the house, she checks the stove once. Then again. Then one more time. Not because she truly believes it's on, but because she can't fully trust the feeling that it's off. So she checks it again. Not for certainty exactly, but for relief. And for a moment, it works. Until the doubt comes back. For most of history, no one would have called this obsessive-compulsive disorder. They would have called it something else. There's a difference between having a thought and getting trapped inside of one. Most people experience intrusive thoughts. A sudden image or a disturbing idea, a fear that appears out of nowhere. And then usually the mind moves on. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the thought stays and repeats itself, keeps asking for attention, and the harder someone tries to make it disappear, the louder it becomes. Today, we call this obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. But like many mental health diagnoses, the experience came long before the label. This is before it had a name. Hey, before we go any further, a quick note. This podcast explores the history of mental health diagnoses. It's not medical advice. It's not therapy. It's not a diagnosis. So if you are concerned about yourself or someone else, it is important to speak with a qualified professional. Long before psychology existed, intrusive thoughts were often interpreted through spiritual or moral frameworks. So unwanted thoughts could be seen as temptation, sin, evidence of corruption. In some religious traditions, people described persistent, blasphemous, or violent thoughts that horrified them. And even centuries ago, people noticed something strange. These thoughts often targeted the things people cared about most. So a deeply religious person might experience intrusive thoughts about sacrilege. A loving parent might suddenly imagine harm coming to their child, not because they wanted those things, but because the mind had attached fear to what mattered most. And without psychological language, these experiences became deeply isolating. Many people suffered silently, terrified not just by the thoughts themselves, but by what the thoughts might mean about them. And maybe that's one of the cruelest parts of OCD. It's not just the fear, but the fear of what the fear says about you. At its core, OCD often revolves around uncertainty. Did I lock the door? Did I say something wrong? Did I contaminate something? Did I hurt someone without realizing it? And most people can tolerate some uncertainty. But for someone with OCD, uncertainty can feel unbearable, like an alarm that never fully shuts off. And so the mind starts searching for relief and checking and repeating and counting and washing and seeking reassurance, not because the person enjoys the rituals. Usually it's the opposite. The rituals are exhausting, but they provide temporary relief from the anxiety. And that relief teaches the brain something powerful. When I do this, I feel safer, even if only for a minute. That's why OCD becomes so consuming, because certainty never fully arrives, so the mind keeps searching for it again and again and again. The words themselves explain part of the cycle. An obsession is a thought that intrudes. A compulsion is the action meant to neutralize it. And over time, the connection between the two can become incredibly strong. A person touches a doorknob and suddenly feels contaminated, so they wash their hands. The washing reduces anxiety for a moment, and the brain learns something important. This worked. Not rationally, but emotionally. The ritual starts to feel necessary. And eventually, life can begin shrinking around the rituals themselves. More time checking locks, more avoiding situations, more mental energy spent trying to prevent catastrophe. And someone might spend hours every day trapped inside these rituals themselves, and they don't even make fully sense to them. And that's the part that makes OCD so painful. People with OCD are often aware that their fears may be irrational, but insight doesn't automatically stop fear. Knowing something is unlikely and feeling safe, they're not always the same thing. By the 19th century, physicians began trying to categorize these experiences more formally. Some describe them as forms of doubt disease. Others focus on compulsive behavior itself. But early interpretations often miss the emotional experience underneath the rituals. People with OCD, they're sometimes viewed as irrational or lacking self-control. And because compulsions can look unusual from the outside, the suffering driving them is often misunderstood. Someone repeatedly washing their hands may appear dramatic. What others don't see is the panic that's underneath it. The desperate attempt to quiet a mind that keeps sounding these alarms. And over time, clinicians began recognizing something very important. The problem isn't usually the thought itself. It's the meaning attached to the thought. This belief that having the thought could say something terrible about who you are. One of the most painful parts of OCD is how often the intrusive thoughts conflict with a person's actual values. So a gentle person may experience really violent thoughts. A devoted partner may suddenly question whether they truly love someone. How about a parent who can become terrified of accidentally harming their child? And because the thoughts feel so disturbing, people often hide them. Not wanting the thoughts becomes evidence that the person cares deeply, but OCD twists that caring into fear. What if the thought means something? What if having the thought makes me dangerous? What if I can't trust myself? And so the mind keeps checking and looking for reassurance, trying to feel completely certain. But complete certainty is impossible. And eventually the search for certainty can start taking over someone's life. That misunderstanding actually still exists today. OCD is often reduced to neatness or organization, but for many people, the real experience is invisible. It's a private struggle with doubt that can quietly consume enormous amounts of energy. Over time, psychology begins understanding OCD less as a character flaw and more as a disorder involving intrusive thoughts and anxiety and this reinforcement cycle. Research explores brain circuitry, or behavioral conditioning, and fear response. Because of this, the treatments evolve. Exposure and response prevention therapy begins. This is a process that helps people gradually tolerate uncertainty without relying on compulsions for relief. And in many ways, that becomes the central challenge of OCD, learning that certainty is not always possible. Really learning that thoughts are not always threats, and then learning how to sit with the discomfort long enough for the fear to loosen its grip. Not because the thoughts disappear completely, but because the relationship to the thoughts begins to change. Let's go back to the woman from the beginning of this episode. Hopefully she eventually leaves the house. But then, halfway down the street, the thought returns. What if the stove actually was on? And suddenly, her body reacts as if the danger is real. Her chest tightens. Her thoughts speed up. So she turns around. Not because she wants to, but because the uncertainty feels unbearable. Across history, people experiencing OCD have often lived trapped between thought and reassurance. Wanting peace more than perfection. Wanting their mind to quiet down just for a little while. And different eras offered different explanations. Sin, weakness, irrationality. Now, obsessive-compulsive disorder. So the label changed, but the human experience remained remarkably consistent. It's a mind trying to protect itself and then becoming trapped in the process. OCD didn't begin when we named it. Human beings have always struggled with fear and doubt and intrusive thoughts. What changed was how we understood the relationship between anxiety and control. And maybe one of the hardest truths inside OCD is this: the search for absolute certainty can slowly take over a person's life. Not because they're irrational or weak, but because the mind is desperately trying to prevent something painful from happening. In the episodes ahead, we're going to continue to explore how diagnoses evolve and how the language we use shapes the way people understand themselves and each other. Next time, we'll explore bipolar disorder and the long history of moods once mistaken for madness, genius, and instability all at once. So, I hope you'll continue listening as we explore the stories behind the labels. This is Before It Had a Name. I'm John, this episode produced by Doug Wild.